When we talk about the why, it's also an important question to ask because when the motivation ebbs and flows, that's going to keep you coming back. I did have a client that did just what you said. She made really great cookies, and her friend said, well, why don't you open up a cookie business? But that never even came into her frame. So when I asked her why, and she said her friends wanted her to, or her friends said she should, that's not enough of a motivation to keep you going through the long haul.
We want to talk about what it takes to be an entrepreneur. Where my mind goes immediately when I think about this part of it is a lot of its mindset and a lot of its personality. But I'm curious for you, you are the premier business advisor within the Farmingdale office that leads these webinars that helps people to figure out, like, is entrepreneurship right for me? So I guess what are the main takeaways from that presentation? And then after that, we'll look into what do you see from the actual clients that you work with, of what personality traits tend to do well with entrepreneurship and which ones maybe not so much.
So I think you're right. I do think that it is part personality and then part skills, and it's kind of a combination of both. But I will say that anybody who starts a business needs some resources to help them because we're not perfect and you can't be good at everything, and nobody is. Some of the things that I talk about in that kind of webinar is basically the type of skills that you might need. And remember, if you don't have these skills, you can certainly find resources to help you with them. Let's first start with the skills. I really feel that planning and organizing is really an important skill. Not everybody's naturally a planner or organizer. And again, there are resources out there that can help you be more planning oriented and organized, like software that people can use. So remember, if you don't have these skills, there's a lot of software out there that can help you, or people software. Like if you're not good at bookkeeping, you can find bookkeeping software and things like that. So those are just some of the skills.
It's a really good point. I like especially the part where you talk about being able to acquire the skills that a lot of people consider personality and what their strengths are. And like, that's like, this is where I'm at. This is who I am. And there's not really growth for me from this perspective. I'm not a planner. I hear a lot from people like, I'm the idea guy.
Yeah.
And I'm like,
Right.
That's good, but do you want your ideas to become a reality? We need to look at some of those weaknesses that you have and figure out where can we plug the gap, and it doesn't, I think it's a really good point that you bring up as well, is that it doesn't have to be you that's plugging it. It can be an additional software program. It can be another person. You can bring on a team. And that's an interesting perspective too. But on the personality trait side, have you seen, you've been doing this for a while.
Yes.
And you've worked with people both in person, remote. Are there any sort of consistencies, even across industry, that seem to pop up time and time again for those who really make it through that initial threshold to actually, I opened my doors and now I'm making sales and all of that, from idea phase to implementation phase?
Yeah. One of the personality traits of the people that are most successful is to kind of not give up and hang in there. So you can call it tenaciousness, you can call it being persistent, you can call it ambitious, but it's all like hanging in there. When the going gets tough, the tough gets going. And I think having a business advisor, and I'm giving a plug to us, but having a business advisor is so important because everybody needs help. And your business advisor will be your biggest cheerleader. So I've helped people kind of get over the hump, and also a lot of people have, self-sabotaging thoughts, or I can't do this, or, they want to do it, but there's some sort of block. So your business advisor can be someone that you can share with, I'm really having a tough time with this, and I want to do it, and I'm ambitious, and I can do it, but I'm having a block. So some people really do have that tenaciousness and ambitiousness, but then the implementation sometimes, that's another level of it.
Right. Yeah. There's always tends to be a lot of energy surrounding the idea in the beginning. It's like you have this idea, you've seen something And I think a common story is if we go with food or like restaurants and somebody's like, oh, I have this recipe that's been in my family and I made it and then I brought it to this party and people are like, oh my gosh, you could do this. You could sell this at a restaurant. And so they're like, I'm ready to start my own restaurant. Like there's so much more that goes into it. But one of the things that I see that's interesting from an advisor perspective and working with clients is how to, it's kind of, I see it as our role to bridge the gap between the enthusiasm and the practicality. Like how can we get that and leverage that to go there and then use it to help even build scaffolding, like to bring back that enthusiasm. Because there are times when I see myself bringing people down to reality, but then also wanting to bring people up to, back to the dream and back to the energy and use that as a well of energy.
Yeah. Well, I have a background in education, especially business education. So there really is, there is a learning curve. There is a learning curve. So I had one of my clients recently just do their first YouTube video, and he sent it to me. He's like, Christina, take a look at this. So, there's, I had to critique, and he wanted that feedback. So I think you have to be open to positive, feedback or constructive criticism. And then, just saying that these are all the good things that you did. These are the things that need to be changed. And next time you're going to do it better. I think as an advisor, you have to, have that empathy and balance of you're with them during this learning curve for some of the things that they're not comfortable with. And so it's important for us to know that the client has to be open to receiving that kind of feedback. And then that's how you grow. And that's how anybody grows.
Right. And thinking about growth, we talked about the skills, the building skills and everything that you can develop. And then when we look at personality traits, we talked about like persistence and stick-to-itiveness. Yeah. Very important. What are your thoughts on somebody's ability that maybe has given up a lot or has a tendency to have an idea, go after it, with all the passion in the beginning and then fall through. And they've seen this time and time and time again. And they're identifying this pattern in themselves, but they have their next idea. And they're like, well, I'd like to go into the SBDC or I'd like to go into anywhere to talk about this idea, but I know I'm not going to follow through with it. Like, is there hope for these people to be an entrepreneur, to own their own small business? Or should they be focusing on something like entrepreneurship, like becoming highly specialized within their own organizations? Or what are your thoughts for somebody in that position?
Yeah, so I think that initially when we talk to the client about the why, that's very important. And it's also an important question to ask and continually ask yourself, because when the motivation has it ebbs and flows, that's going to keep you coming back. I did have a client that did just what you said. She made really great cookies, and her friend said, well, why don't you open up a cookie business? But that never even came into her frame. So when I asked her why, and she said her friends wanted her to, or her friends said she should, that's not enough of a motivation to keep you going through the long haul. So really understanding why you're starting this business and coming back to that time and time again is really important.
That's huge. And it was something that I've done with myself and I've done with other colleagues over the years is doing like a 5 whys or a 7 whys practice. And so where you dive into your own meaning and your own purpose and like, why am I really doing this? Like, what is the deeper part of me that's striving for this to be the thing? And then what I've seen with that is you end up either confirming like, yes, this is the absolute path that I need to take. And now I have those 7 whys deep to answer at my core, this is what I need to do. Or you realize that this is just one, and most of the time this is what happens. Most of the time it's like, this is one outlet, this is one avenue I could take to fulfill that core deep value and need. And I think that's an important aspect for people to consider when they're batting around the idea of entrepreneurship, is the whole experience from my perspective, and shoot holes in this, but for my thought process, the whole thing is experimental.
But that's why you need the business plan.
Right. Yeah.
The business plan forces you to think of all the aspects of the business.
Right. And the beautiful part about the business plan, and one of the things that I've heard you say, and I think is so appropriate, is that it's like a living, breathing document. Like this thing grows with you in your business. And so it goes like, I was talking with Sarah about this when it comes to the show. And we were talking about how we are looking at each part of this, from like the lighting to the seating, like all of it's an experiment. All of it, if we look at it and we remove ourselves emotionally from like, okay, this is so easy to do, right? You let ego get involved. So I come in and I'm like, well, I put the table here. And I put the camera there, and I put these curtains up, and then so somebody can come in and like, oh, well, what if you just turn the table like that? And you just made it like a diamond instead of a square, you'd end up saving more space. I'm like, we can't do that.
Right.
This table position is part of me.
Right.
And so, but when you remove yourself and you just see every single part of it as an experiment, like, oh, I wonder what happens if I do this. Then it kind of removes you. And I think it gives people more of a license, more agency, even within their own endeavors to say, if this isn't working, I want to try something else. Because I think that that's a problem. Have you seen that with clients that you've worked with where they have an idea and it's not necessarily working out? And you're like, well, we could adjust the idea. You're like, but this is the idea.
Yeah.
Like, have you seen any of that? Yeah.
Well, I had a client recently that was trying to run two businesses at the same time. Both were sort of, one of them was a little further along. The other one is in its infancy stage. And from what I was hearing from her is that the one that she originally started is not her future. She doesn't want to do that in the future. So we talked about how do you dissolve this business and move forward with the other one.
Wow.
And that was a really big decision. And I had sort of coached her into coming to that light because it really is a light, when you say, you know what? I don't need to have two businesses. I can just move forward with one. So sometimes, if some people are doing two different things or too many things in their life, they have to realize that maybe I should just need to focus.
How important focus is.
Yeah.
That's something that I think when you were talking about being organized, being able to place your focus, how can somebody, if they're trying to pursue entrepreneurship or they're trying to see if this idea is like feasible or viable, where does focus need to go in the beginning stages? Like when they're looking at, okay, well, I have my cake that I made and I want to bring it out. Like how do they leverage their focus? I guess in the spirit of, is entrepreneurship right for you? How do they know that their focus is in the right place in the beginning and throughout, and especially for this conversation for like the ideation phase?
Yeah. Well, you have to be passionate about what it is you're doing. So there has to be some inner passion. You have to love what you're doing and you have to be good at it. Because the learning curve to learn it makes everything so much harder. Like even if you go for a loan, the bank officer is going to say, well, how much experience do you have in this kind of business? And so having the experience and the passion kind of sets you up for a better chance of success. So it's not just loving what you do, but you have to have the skills and experience to do it.
Yeah.
So I think that makes a big difference.
No, that's huge. I'm working with a client right now who's in that kind of boat where he's got all this experience in this field and he's like, I don't really want to do that. Whoa. I'm like, that's fine. And they're like, well, I want to start this business. And they have it's like they're really familiar with IT, but they want to go into something that's simple. And so there's not even a clear goal on the other side. It's like, I just want to own my own business and I want it to be simple.
Yeah.
Like,
hold on.
I think that's part of not necessarily the personality, but part of the traits for entrepreneurship is if you're seeking something simple and easy, this might not be the right path. There might be other ways to accomplish. I think that goes back to like those 7 whys, 5 whys. Why do you want to own your own business? Why do you want to be an entrepreneur? I guess it goes really to kind of a core question that I'm super curious for your answer because I have no idea what you're going to say. So what would you say is the difference, if there is one, between being an entrepreneur and trying to start your own business? Is there a difference? Is there a significant enough difference to warrant a conversation?
That's a really good question. I think that I was talking to a client yesterday who's owned a yoga studio for 20 years, and she's getting burnt out. And so we kind of talked a little bit about why is that happening or whatever. And she said, I've owned my own business for 20 years. I think when you say you own your own business, I think it's part of your life a big part of your life. But when you say you're an entrepreneur, it embodies you, and so you won't get burnt out because it's more of a, I don't know, it's kind of like an inner thing, more of an outer thing.
Right.
And I feel like that's the difference. I mean, if you look up the dictionary, it's probably just a synonym.
Right.
But I feel like when you say entrepreneur versus I have my own business, that's the difference.
Right. Like it's a mentality. It's
Almost.
like how you view it.
Yeah.
It's interesting. As I see, when I think about it, in my head, my default is, and this could be way wrong. It's so interesting to like play out and to figure out what it is with things that you just intuitively feel that you know. I think of an entrepreneur as a lover of the game. They're like, I like the business game. Going back to the E-Myth Revisited, Any Business, which is a great book, which we need to make sure that we put into the show notes. But one of the initial premise that they give in the book is that, you know, you want to build your business like a franchise. And so I think somebody that goes into start like a local hardware shop or something, and then like they hand it down to their kids and their kids kind of take it over and things like that. Like to me, that's like the small business owner, right? Yeah. And then the entrepreneur is like, well, I created the distribution process, a distribution company that gives those people nails, you know, and maybe I started a shop, but then I sold it off and now I'm starting this next one. They're almost like a serial business.
It's more of a visionary.
Exactly. They're the big idea people.
Yeah. They see where the business is going to go. Yeah.
And so with that, when you're thinking about the idea people and kind of tapping more into that book, you have your technicians, right? You have your managers, you have your own, and I forget what the other ones are. But you have
well, it's like the McDonald's story, right?
Yes.
So if the McDonald's story had stayed where it was, McDonald's wouldn't be where it was today. Because the two people, Ray and what was the other guy's name? I forgot. McDonald's, Ray and.
Oh my gosh.
Yeah, Mac. Was it Mac McDonald? No, I don't know.
That would be great.
That'd be good. I don't know.
We have our local research on it.
So the McDonald brothers, if they had just stayed where they were, they would just probably be a one-store wonder. But, you know, Ray Kroc, the franchise, the milkshake salesman. Oh, Maurice. Okay. So the Ray Kroc, the franchise, the milkshake salesman that he was, he's the one that had the visionary to take it to a bigger level.
Right.
So if you want to call it, maybe that would be kind of like the difference, which is kind of what you were saying.
Yeah. Just I think to your point though, I think you're 100% right when it comes to it's not a hard line distinction. It's an energy perspective. Like where is your passion? Where is your energy? What's your goal? It's kind of like the difference in your why.
Yeah.
Like if your why is to scale, sell.
And
it's interesting.
Sometimes it is time to sell.
Right.
Like when you get on, with the woman for the yoga studio after 20 years, maybe she's at a different point in her life. She said, I want to spend more time with my grandchildren.
Right.
Well, there you go. I mean, now the writing's on the wall. Is it time to sell the business?
And how important is a business plan at that point? To have that ready
now
to
we
go.
have a succession plan.
Yep.
That's it.
Yeah, that's huge. Are there any other lingering thoughts that you have? Any other advice that you give to people that would be, is entrepreneurship right for them? Any practices that they could go through themselves to run them through like an assessment or something that you've seen?
Yeah, we actually do have in our software, we do have in EntreSkills, there is a little bit of there's some background self-assessment stuff that you can take. Great. Yeah, so for anyone who's a SBDC client, we can offer that to you through EntreSkills.
You heard it.
Assessment.
You heard it. You know where to go. This podcast is produced by the New York Small Business Development Center at Farmingdale State College.